So what seems to differentiate the elite athletes from people who are just not stem cells, what seems to make us different when we age from when we were young, stem cells.
Yeah. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Bob Hariri from Piloting Health, and today is an important day for me because I'm back reunited with one of my old colleagues and collaborators, Dr. Jacob Wilson from the Applied Science and Performance Institute in Tampa, Florida. Jacob, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob.
Great to see you again. So, you know, we came together on the belief that muscle as an organ system in the body was critically important to health and the emerging world of longevity science. And for those of you who may know this, about 15 or 20 years ago, it became clear to me that muscle was a critically important tissue of the body for lots of reasons. Aside from the force-generating ability, muscle is an enormously important synthetic organ. It synthesizes all kinds of proteins and peptides that are critical to immune function, neurologic activity and function, and so on. But Jacob and I decided that we were going to look at one way to counterbalance what happens to us as we age, which is losing muscle mass, by addressing a particular protein called myostatin. And myostatin actually inhibits the body's ability to build muscle. So Jacob's team at Applied Science and Performance Institute worked on a clinical trial where we measured changes in muscle mass based upon blocking myostatin. But enough about that. Today we're going to talk about how cell therapy may play a role in that. So Jacob, tell the audience a little bit about what you do at ASPI.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bob, thanks for having me on the show. Obviously, Bob and I have been friends for a really long time. We love muscle. We love stem cells and all of that. So my background is I actually, was very big into, health. I started off playing hockey, actually. And, I had a hard time putting on size. And so that's what led me to actually study muscle.
All right.
So I ended up going to school. I got my PhD in skeletal muscle. Physiology was my focus. And the thing is, with age, we look and we lose about 1% muscle per year after the age of 50.
Right.
And that's a problem, right? So when you lose muscle, you can fall, you can break a hip, and then it's pretty much over. Along with muscle, you lose strength, and your metabolism goes down. You start to put on body weight. Your insulin sensitivity goes down. So muscle is a very underappreciated tissue. And so, of course, we did work with each other. This is quite a long time ago. We started to look at what's going on? What are the mechanisms people lose muscle, right? And so that's where we really came together on this whole stem cell topic.
So it's interesting. So muscle turns out not just to be important as a synthetic organ producing all these important signaling molecules and peptides, but it's also because it's generally about 50% of the wet body mass of an individual is muscle tissue. It turns out that it's the largest venous capacitance organ in the body. And what that means is that there's a huge amount of volume of blood vessels on the venous side of the circulation that traverse your muscle tissue. That's where, because of the low pressure nature of the venous system, that's where many of the stem, progenitor, and immune cells actually reside at rest. They stick to the walls of the blood vessels.
Yes.
And so it's one of the reasons why exercise and things like massage and so on actually helps mobilize those stem cells and makes it available to the body to respond to disease or injury or even an infection. So knowing that, we said, well, what are some ways that we might be able to increase and preserve healthy, lean muscle mass? So myostatin inhibition was one way. And then obviously we've been spending the last decade focused on how stem cells can do that. So give me an example of the typical target that you guys go after in your work at ASPI around muscle? Because I know exercise is a big part of that.
Yeah, well, and talking about the importance of stem cells, when you look at with ASPI, we have worked with some of the most elite athletes in the world. Now, that goes from some of the most elite bodybuilders in the world. We have been featured in different documentaries, movies, ESPN, on people like Mr. Olympia, all sorts of the most muscular individual in the world. And so we actually studied why those people who are sometimes 300 pounds, how they could gain muscle that rapidly. Now, we also work with NFL football players. We worked with Tampa Lightning, some of the best track athletes in the world. Why do they respond to training better than other people? So we did studies to find out why that was the case. So we took people who, and said, okay, we're going to take people who are actually naive to training, and we're going to train them hard, put them on the same program, same diet. And what ended up happening is that you see some people, what we call extreme responders to training.
Right.
Like they blew up, they gained muscle, they got stronger, they got faster. Some people, moderate responders, like they gained moderate amount of muscle. And then you had some people who didn't respond at all. You know, those guys, like they just can't put on weight, right? So we looked, why is it the case? What turned out was the case is that the athletes had more stem cells, right? And their muscle. So they had more stem cells and allowed them to respond better. Now, also interesting, Bob, same thing happens with aging.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so like people when like, you know, my dad always tells me like, you know what, I could work out hard, but if I just recover like I did when I was younger, turns out it's the same mechanism. People, as we age, you have less stem cells and you can't respond to training as well. So what seems to differentiate the elite athletes from people who are just not stem cells, what seems to make us different when we age from when we were young, stem cells.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
And that's music to my ears, because we're in the era now where the ability to get supplemental stem cells to, what I like to say is, recharge your regenerative engine is now possible. And one of the things we do here at Fountain Life is when we assess patients who have a specific need, either because they have age-related sarcopenia, muscle loss, or they have more advanced problem, which is characterized by frailty, we can address that by giving them stem cells via either intravenous infusion or intramuscular injection, and those cells can actually help boost the regenerative potential of the tissue, thereby building more muscle mass and strength. So it's interesting. You remember you and I talked about a paper that was published probably about 15 years ago, a study done at the Karolinska Institute where they studied 9,000 men for 25 years, looking to see if body mass index was a better predictor of longevity and disease resistance. And what they found was that it was actually muscle strength, mass, and preservation of strength and mass that was more correlated to elevated lifespan and disease resistance.
Exactly.
So that goes along exactly with what you're talking about. So I know that you and I have been talking about now studying our clients and our patients at Fountain Life and evaluating them prior to entering the program, during their journey in the program, and then as a consequence of getting treated with stem cells. So that's one of the things we want to get to do. So let's talk about some other stuff. What else is going on in your world of muscle biology?
You know, well, we're doing a lot of research like across lifespan, really on muscle. I think outside of stem cells, you know, there's treatments that help when in conjunction with stem cells. You know, obviously we look at things like you know, helping people with optimizing their protein intake, right?
Well, what about hormone replacement therapy?
So hormone replacement therapy is great. I think that's a huge big deal, right? When we look, just like as muscle mass goes down, our testosterone goes down.
Right.
And so basically, just by replacing that, people can maintain their muscle mass a lot better with age. Actually, it plays into stem cells as well.
Right.
You know, it makes them become more functional as well. So I think hormone replacement therapy is fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot of supplements that work. And
you've been a champion in the nutrition space, right?
Yes.
So give me a sense of like, what would you recommend to you know, an average 40 to 50-year-old who feels that they're beginning to lose their muscle mass? What would you focus them on nutrition-wise?
So what I would focus them on, number one, is like balancing their plate. So someone who's 40 or 50, the thing to realize is that their insulin sensitivity goes down. Right. And that means they can't use carbohydrates as well. Now, part of that's because their muscle mass is going down. Right. Right? So for them, they want a balanced plate. Like they look at their plate, it should be equal balance between protein, you know, and unprocessed carbohydrates. You know, it could be like green beans, vegetables, salad. Right. The more unprocessed, the better. That's going to help with insulin sensitivity, and at least half their plate would be protein, right? that's important that every meal they're getting protein. I think between meals, I'd recommend having like essential amino acids to keep muscle like spiking.
Right.
Every 40, 50-year-old should be on creatine. I think that's going to be beneficial.
Tell us about creatine.
Yeah. So basically, so in our muscle, we have different energy sources. We have carbohydrates in our muscle, and that helps us lift heavy weights, be more explosive. We have fat that's stored in there, but another fuel there is creatine. And creatine actually is what helps us to lift really heavy weights, and heavier weights what allows us to gain muscle.
Right.
But the other thing about creatine is also important for brain function.
Exactly.
Yeah. So basically it helps us as set another energy source for your brain. So that helps us when we exercise. So it's not just your muscles getting better, but your brain's getting better, and your brain controls, a lot of the force output.
So tell us the difference between creatine and ketones, because that's another thing people ask me oftentimes. What about, increasing your ketone generation?
Yeah, so actually, I actually wrote a book called The Ketogenic Bible with my friend Dr. Ryan Lowry, and we patented a lot of technology on like ketones as well. So basically what happens is our body will primarily use carbohydrates as primary fuel source. But if we run out of carbohydrates, your body has to move to an alternative fuel source.
Right.
And so usually what happens when people restrict carbohydrates and they run out, their liver runs out of carbohydrates, their muscles get lower on carbohydrates, they will take fat and convert it over another fuel called ketones. And ketones basically they generate more ATP, basically per gram,
right,
than like carbohydrates, and they're great for the brain.
Exactly. I know. I take a ketone supplement, and it kind of wakes you up. It gives you that increased level of attention.
It does.
It's fantastic.
It does.
So I know your book. It's a great book, and the Ketogenic Bible, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it sheds light on elements of metabolism people don't always think about. So as we're kind of moving forward and focusing people's attention on muscle, ways to build and preserve muscle, the other question is how important is different types of exercise, anaerobic versus aerobic exercise, muscle loading versus non-muscle loading.
Yeah.
Like I'm intrigued by this new focus on things like Tai Chi, which is really almost a softer form of calisthenics, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What's most important for muscle building?
So I think a variety of movements is ideal for muscle building. Okay, like even if you take, for example, so obviously the foundation would be resistance training, but the thing, here's what we've learned about resistance training, is that could be body weight resistance training,
right.
It can be bands, it can be free weights, it can be machines. One of the biggest things we know with resistance training is it's how close you're coming to not being able to do any more reps. So let's say someone, for example, is able to do 20 reps with a weight. Let's say they can do body weight lunges for 20 reps. They need to be able to do, like, in every set, at least like 17 reps. You want to come between with 3 to 5 reps of not being able to do anymore. That means even if you do lightweight,
right.
It's effective so long as you come between 1 to 5 reps of going to failure.
So you can do that by increasing the weight to that point.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
You can do it by increasing the weight or increasing the number of repetitions,
Gotcha.
Or you look at Tai Chi or something, you can do it by maybe slowing down the repetition, changing the angle of the weight, so long as the person's like close. Now, here's the thing to understand is of course, you want more activity, because the thing is with muscle, there's the size, but there's also the mitochondria.
Right.
And that's where things like Tai Chi, where you're kind of building a lot of the endurance in the muscle, and I think helps with building mitochondria as well. So you also want to that's why I think cardiovascular work is good,
right,
for longevity.
Right. So we got to wrap this all into a program where, in addition to exercise and nutrition, we provide supplemental tools like cell therapy,
yes,
in order to round it all together to maximize the end result, which is preserving healthy lean mass, strength, flexibility, and then your ability to respond to the stresses of life by making sure that your regenerative engine, which resides in the reservoir of stem cells in every tissue in the body, is at its highest maximum quantitatively as well as quality.
I think it's the key.
So as we're kind of moving forward, you and I are going to do some more work using the same tools we developed in the past for inhibiting myostatin, and now you apply that to clinical studies where we're using cell therapy to augment the regenerative engine.
Absolutely, we're super excited about it.
Well, listen, Jacob, it's great to see you. It's great to work with you again, and I would love to get back on the podcast when we're talking about the actual programs and trials we're doing.
Let's do it. Absolutely. Thank you.
So everybody, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. Again, we're here with Dr. Jacob Wilson from the Applied Science and Performance Institute. I'm Dr. Bob Hariri, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.